Hey, Jenna, or anybody else watching this. I want to thank you for posting the question to my website and specifically requesting a video to help answer your question. They're a little bit more work, but it's fun for a change of pace, and you've been keeping me busy lately. I have your question here printed off. The individuals who are watching this video, it's up above on the website. But Jenna asks, she'd like me to explain how a person could go about from living in and following love. I'm sorry, I'm saying that wrong. She wants to know how somebody could go about living in and following love instead of doing that in fear. She knows several people who are stuck in situations because of their fear, and she'd appreciate a video, hence this, that she could share explaining how to overcome fear and to follow love. Also, she goes on to ask, how do you overcome being judged by other people, particularly when they claim to be your friends, but they judge you based on very little info? Well, those are excellent questions, and I've covered this information extensively in my 3 books I've written, which are for sale here on the website, and through a number of my different posts. And the reason I choose to focus so much on fear is because it is the most seductive force there is in the universe. Now, please understand, I did not say the most powerful, but quite literally, it can distill itself down to such a fine form that when it's operating from within the individual human being, the personality, from within their psyche, they are absolutely, almost without exception, not aware of it because it will hide itself in their rationale, in their reasons, in their commonsensical positions, in their justifications, in their determinations. And I mean, it goes on and on and on. But it can be very hard to learn how to recognize it when it's operating in those distilled fashions. But still, we have to. If your soul is one that's awakening in your lifetime and you are interested in trying to become the best version of yourself that you can, in terms of your spiritual growth and development, whatever that might mean to you, then absolutely we have to learn how to work on this fear. And it's crazy because the short answer is that in relationships, one of the greatest things that causes trouble with them when we are adults is fear, how it operates through our own previous imprinting or programming that occurred for us earlier in our lifetime. Not only our relationship with our parents and siblings, but with other people in our life who were important to us. And I write extensively in my second book about how fear comes to uh, comes to a point where it starts to solidify or become established or manifest itself in the life of the human being. There's different types of it, and generally it will take a certain pattern of development to cause it to become manifested in the way that it will. And so there's a lot of information in that second book that's of much value regarding this issue. But generally, how we were raised in our childhoods, not only by our parents, but by anybody who had some position of authority over us. It could be grandparents, even older siblings, teachers, educators in our school system, church leaders, aunts, uncles, grandparents, anyone who was in a position of authority to us who could have had a significant input into helping teach us about who they thought we were and how the world works and how we can best make that operate together. That's part of our imprinting, our early programming. And as we become an adult and we leave the nest, so to speak, and we go out into the world, we take with us this initial programming that tells us where appropriate or inappropriate life action might lie, or what's true or what's false, or what's us and what's not us. And the voice in our head that's driving all that sounds like our voice, but it really almost in a sense doesn't really belong to us because it was put there by other people. We accepted it. And there's nothing wrong in that. It's part of the experience of being changed by a culture and a society and a family, and it's part of the process of growing and developing as a human being. However, as we leave the nest and we go out there with this programming, we're going to start having experiences, sometimes a lot, sometimes a little, but overall, Generally, by the time we've spent about a generation out there, or 20 years for sake of argument, using our previous programming, we start to have experiences that are counter to that, what I call learning self-knowledge. And that self-knowledge is what gives us an opportunity to establish our own parameters in terms of our programming and our imprinting. And there's a very significant internal developmental milestone in the life that occurs generally around mid 30s to late 30s, by 40 years of age. There's a lot of variation here, but generally by the time a human being is 40, as opposed to the 20 when arguably they might have left home. Some leave earlier, some leave later, yes. But the point is, by the time you've been out there for about a generation with this programming, you have had enough of these moments of what I call learning self-knowledge to establish more truly who and what you are, as opposed to who you were raised to be. And there's nothing wrong with the previous system, but it may not fit with truly who you are. Let me give you one brief example to make my point. Say you were raised by parents who taught you, and you believe this, that anyone who's of a lower socioeconomic status is to be avoided at all costs because somehow they're in God's disfavor. And maybe even furthermore, that people who are of a different skin color, a different race, like African Americans, for example, that they're to be avoided because somehow they're not as equally valid as us Caucasian people. And you've been raised in this. There was no reason for you to not accept it as being true. And you get out there as an adult and you start going out on your own. And one of the first things you do is you start running smack into experiences where some of the most kind, generous, intelligent, natural leaders, some of the most amazing human beings you've ever met happen to be of a lower socioeconomic status, and they've got black skin. And you're like, this doesn't fit. There's your self-knowledge. You have enough of those, and then you can get to a point, arguably, by early middle age, we'll call it mid to late 30s, 40s, somewhere there, where you can shed, quite literally, your previous programming and establish more fully and truly who you are. Now, previous to this chronological age, the relationships where we meet with other human beings are largely impacted and influenced in a very real way, Jenna, by this programming that's running in the background. Just like on a computer, there are programs sometimes running in the background that you cannot see, you're not aware of, and they use resources. They can clog up your computer and make it slow and sluggish, and someone who's skilled in these things can take care of all that for you, so you're back up and running like it used to be. But the point is, you're almost running on a sort of autopilot or an unconscious waking sleep, if you will, with that running in the background, and it can have a very real influence on your relationships with others. Now, once you get past age 40 in the life chronologically, and if you transit that major internal developmental milestone in a positive and constructive way, and not in a negative, passive, acquiescent way, and I talk about that in great detail in my second book. Once you shed that previous programming, then things can change dramatically. You can have a much clearer perspective on who you are, what you're worthy of, and why you're here. And because of that, you can connect with someone else like that, and the relationship can be amazing, beyond verbalization to even express. This does not mean that you cannot have a rewarding relationship with someone who was established before that. It just means that there can be a lot of things in the way in there that get in the way, and they're all driven by fear, but you don't know it. Like things, the number one thing that's the problem isn't the other person, it's you. It's not somebody else, it's me. Things like, am I worthy of life to be this good? Do they really think I'm attractive? You know, in the beginning, maybe you're having a relationship and like, well, God, what happens when they get to know me and they see me naked and I got a gut and, you know, my teeth are yellow and crooked, or, you know, whatever, I have bad breath and I have gas sometimes, and oh, it smells when I go number two. I mean, all these things that are part of being human. Literally, fear can just work on it where it can make you feel uncomfortable to completely open up and be vulnerable to another human being. And I should say, and again, I talk about this also in my second book, in the first 3 years of life, from 0 to 3 years of age, if a human being does not learn trust, if they do not learn trust during that time, then this thing with relationships and living a life more from a space of love than from fear, it's going to be interfered with greatly. It doesn't mean that it can't be dealt with and overcome. I don't mean to say that. I do mean to be clear that there will be more work for these types of people who did not learn trust in the first 3 years of their life because they don't know what it feels like. They don't know what it looks like. You can show it through living it by your own living example, and you can try to explain to them with words what it might feel like and what the rewards can be of trust and intimacy. But if they're not open to it, it may not resonate with them, and it can be a very thankless task at best. So the real question becomes where to find that line drawn in the sand between where you're overextending yourself so much, you're trying to impose your way of living on them, and developmentally, they're just not ready for that or capable of it. They're not interested. And so then we can run dangerously close to almost, you could argue, incurring karma because you're trying to interfere with someone else's life choices. This is hard right here, but you could almost have to get to a point sometimes where you have to allow somebody else the freedom to live their life the way they best see fit. And if you're someone that's in a relationship with them and every time they see you or interact with you, they're dissatisfied with your behavior or upset with your behavior or just angry with the things that you're choosing to do because of insecurities within them that are driven by new experiences in your life or new relationships with other people. So if you're in
mostly by fear-based behaviors. They won't know it though. They won't know it at all. It will be uh, couched in commonsensical positions, reasoned out positions, matter of fact positions, things that feel comfortable and right to them. Because if you're someone who's grown accustomed to living a life more in negative energy, like living through fear, that's what's going to feel natural for you. To actually become more positive and constructive and live from a space of love, that's not going to feel right. It's going to feel foreign. It's going to feel bad. It isn't going to work. So the real question becomes if you can find some way to determine if this is what's going on when you have an open-minded, open-hearted talk with someone, just laying everything out on the table, spilling your guts out, and it becomes clear to you that you're making their life miserable by trying to be the best version of you that you can become, then you have a decision to make. And here's the thing I want to be clear about. If you have to make a decision to end a relationship or leave a relationship, it can seem very harsh and difficult and painful beyond verbal expression. And yes, it's going to hurt their feelings. But the needs of the soul are more important than the feelings of the personality. And I'm sorry if that sounds cold, but here's the thing you may not give any thought to. What happens if you were to find out by giving them the space to move on in a new direction in their life because you choose to end the relationship? That once you've both had time to process this in ways that are respective to both your situations developmentally, and you reestablish new connections in your life, what happens if you were to look at both of those lives and you find out that the quality of life is actually improved and better for both people? Yet before, in the past, when you were together, you were miserable. You have to think about that sometimes, and sometimes doing the right thing is hard. It's difficult. People who are stuck in situations because of their fear, it's because they've grown accustomed to that. It's what feels most comfortable. And I would argue beyond a certain chronological age, it's only much more difficult for them to try and break that cycle. And if there's someone who's 40 years of age or older and they're still in these patterns, I don't want to sound, negative, but the truth is the way the deck is stacked, it's very highly improbable that there's going to be any real change of that for the remainder of the context of the life. I don't mean that they can't have moments where they're happy and having fun and good. Yes. But as far as not pledging allegiance to their fear every day through various numbers of behaviors, that's not going to change. It's not going to go away. Not realistically. It's just so hard. If they couldn't do it earlier, it only becomes more difficult as you get older. If I had to use an analogy here, it would be something like this. Imagine you're 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old,
7, whatever age, and you're trying to learn how to ride a bike. It's hard. It's not easy. And when you first take off the training wheels, whoa, look out, crash and burn. Now imagine instead if you miss that opportunity when you're young, but before you die, you want to learn how to ride a bike. Now you're 95 years old, 95, and you're going to try to learn how to ride that bike. It's even harder then, and it's more scary then, and it's more difficult then. I hope you can intuitively connect the dots about how when you miss developmental milestones in your life of what typically occurs as a human being grows and develops, that you can readdress it later in the life, but that it's much more difficult. And I don't know how to use words in a way to get clearer about it than that. So with that said, if someone's of 40 years of age or older and they're stuck in these kind of negative, unproductive, toxic, energetic relationships, you really need to take a hard look in the mirror and consider making a change. Now, in all of these relationships, whether we're talking older chronological age or younger, the number one thing that drives relationships to have difficulty, it's not the other person, it's you. It's what you've got in you. How do you fix that? How do you improve that? How do you work on that? You've got to find some way to do something in your life that causes you to increase your self-image, your self-esteem, your self-confidence. You've got to feel good about who you are. There's lots have been written that says you can't love someone else until you can love yourself. You can't like someone else until you like yourself. Things like that. Instead of focusing on their behavior, the problem behavior, focus on you. What are you doing with your life work? Work on developmentally growing and developing yourself, pursuing a path that brings you satisfaction, enjoyment, and it actually is improving your confidence in yourself, your self-esteem, your self-image. That's the key. That's the key right there to having these relationship problems not be so difficult where you're butting heads. It's like, in order for you to find someone who can resonate with you on that level, you have to be resonating on that level. If you have a good physical appearance on the outside, but you've got these programs running back in the back that someone can't see and don't know are consuming resources, you're not really projecting your true self to someone when you start or try to begin a relationship. And in a lot of those cases, it's one person trying to outguess the other one to try and fit in the mold to qualify for the prize. Whatever that is, sex, money, glamour, prestige, someone to share your life with, whatever. But if that's what's happened and you weren't true up front and being open about who you are, transparent, really, then as that starts to come into the picture, the interpersonal relationship between the two of you is going to become strained. And your relationship with other people that was not strained before will become strained because your interpersonal relationship with the significant other is strained. And that can cause some people to start looking for the escape route because it just becomes so difficult in the life. You can't get a break anywhere. You can't get a stress relief anywhere. It's just like this is not how life is supposed to be. Everybody has a right to be happy and have a quality of life that is improving day by day. And there's someone out there for you like that if you're someone who wants to share your life with someone. I absolutely guarantee it. And it's not just one person. There's more than one. So, but you have to change who you are. You have to raise your vibration level, so to speak, in terms of, are you living a life more in tune with coming from a space daily of gratitude and appreciation for who you are and why you're here? And what you might be able to do. And are you using your creative abilities on a daily basis as much as you can to try and improve this thing called your life in whatever capacity? Your contact with your source, whatever you want to determine that to be, God or what have you, your contact with that is through your creative abilities. Get in touch with that, develop those, raise your vibrational level, get to a point where you're trying to become the best version of yourself that you can be. And this is automatically, it's going to help make the world a better place to live in. It's automatically going to affect other people and how they interact with you. And those who are not vibrating on that level are going to be made to feel uncomfortable by you, and that's okay. We want them to feel uncomfortable so they can go find someone who's like resonating or vibrating at their level. So if you want to draw someone to you that's right for you, correct for you in terms of challenging you in good ways to grow you and develop in developmental ways to help you to become the best version of yourself you can become, this is key. This is how you have to go about it. Now, you talk in here about how some people judge you, and they claim to be your friends, but they judge you based on very little info. This is so common, Jenna. My God, I could put a whole book on just this one thing. Most often in life, what happens is human beings, we're taught not to judge, right? But there is a judgment that's good spiritual work. Not a first level judgment, but I'll call it a second level judgment. And to clarify what I mean, if you go interact with some human being or some organization or some experience or event, and we project our ideas onto that first, then we react and make a judgment off of that, that's bad judgment. Why? Because we've never given this person or this thing an open-minded and a open-hearted chance to try and look at it for what it really is, who they truly are. Once you learn who they truly are, what they really are about, and then you determine to make a judgment based upon that, level 2 judgment, because you determine, well, that's not what I'm about in life. That's okay. That's a good judgment. Why? Because it gives them the space to go be who they are and be around other people that understand that way of life so that you can have the freedom and space to go where you need to go, to be around other people who understand the way that you perceive and interpret life. It's a win-win. Level 2 judgment is a win-win, not level 1. So people are dealing with looking at you from their own projections. That right there should be a clue to you that developmentally, they're not at a place where they're capable of giving level 2 judgment. Now, you can try to explain it to them and see if they might listen and learn, but if they don't, then you have another decision to make. Everywhere you interact with people in your life, as soon as they open their mouth and start talking, you can reach insight into their psyche. The words they use to explain themselves, the concepts that they're talking about, you can reach some insight into not only what their soul age might be, but where they might be at in that age of soulness, like if they're an old soul or a mature soul, where they might be in there, or a young soul, where they might be in terms of a perceptive and interpretive level of development. You also can reach insight into if they're like a positive or negative person, for a better way to say it, or another way to say it is if they're someone who's living in fear or someone who's living in love. You can tell that when you interact with them. You listen to them. You can tell about their programming. You can tell about their imprinting. You can tell about their belief system, and they don't even know it. They don't even know it. But you can reach this insight into them. It's kind of like using your intellectual mind and your intuitive mind at the same time as you're interacting with people. Paying attention to what's coming from the outside channel, but also paying attention to what's coming on to you from your inside channel at the same time, and finding a way for those to meet together in a way that makes sense to give you a more clearer picture about what's going on. So the focus isn't about you trying to turn your friends around to teach them how not to judge you when they don't even know you about things, or your place is not to go out there and try and change someone else because they're living in fear and not love. This is the hard part, Jenna. When you get to a point where you start to like who you are and you understand much more clearly who you are, why you're here, or even why you might be here, and what you're worthy of, you're going to get to a point where this is not an issue for you anymore, because you can allow people to be themselves and be who they are. You can give them the space to go, if you will, make their mistakes and follow their own paths that are different from you. And you don't have to go try to change them. And instead, this is important, instead you start to live a life where you focus on your own life plans. And you no longer spend energy, significant amounts of it anyway, especially, you no longer spend energy spinning wheels, wasting energy, trying to change people. That's not what it's about, Jenna. Instead, it's about learning to accept people for who they are and where they're at developmentally. And if we're talking about sharing a life together, then it's got to be someone that's on your level, or you're robbing yourself. And if you rob yourself, then the whole world suffers. Everybody in your immediate life suffers. Your family, your children. I'm sorry about that phone ring in the back. I'm just sitting at home recording this, and so there's going to be some ambient noise going on in the background. I apologize about that. I'm not sure how to pause this and not have to start the whole video over, so we're going to have to live with that. In fact, I'm going to turn the ringer down.
Hello, it's Charles and Margaret.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. Isn't that terrible? I should have thought to turn that off first. Anyway, I hope this makes sense, Jenna, and anybody else who's listening. I love questions, even if they're hard ones, and sometimes my answers may start to sound similar, and there's a reason for that. It's because of the commonality we all share as human beings. And there's really, in a sense, just two forces at work here, love and fear. And you asked a beautiful question about how can you help teach someone the value of living a life more in love than that of fear. And how do you deal with people who are judging you without really knowing you? And one more time on that level, you have to get to a point where your self-esteem, your self-image, your confidence in yourself, your knowledge in knowing who and what you are, why you're here, and why you're worthy of having good things to happen, you have to get to a point where that is so strong, this other stuff, people judging you for it and saying criticisms and mean and cruel and hateful things, it doesn't bother you. It's like, to use an analogy, it'd be like water off a duck's back. It doesn't stick. It just runs off. You almost really have to get to a point like that, and sometimes saying nothing is the best way to deal with these types of bullies, to ignore them. And because when you give them nothing with which to respond, it's like they almost have to look in their own internal mirror, and they don't like what they see, so they'll probably leave. They'll probably do you the favor and leave, or think, that was not a very nice thing to say. I'm sorry. I don't know why I said that. And sometimes people don't understand why they do the things they do. But in relationships, it can be so complicated sometimes because there's so many things in life that can impinge, come from the outside world and impinge on a relationship, that it causes a failure of the relationship itself when there really wasn't anything wrong with it. But because neither one of the people had enough love in them to support and encourage each other, to learn to recognize these influences as not being truly germane to the relationship. And I'm talking about all kinds of things that impinge, like education and employment and politics and religion and families and jobs and friends, and you just name it, money, all the things that can cause stresses. These things can all come in and impinge on a relationship and cause problems with that relationship that have nothing to do with that relationship. But if it was a healthy relationship, not a toxic one, and it was resonating or vibrating in a good way, it would deal with those things. And because it would deal with it in a way that's becoming to both parties, the relationship will become more. It will become deeper, more meaningful, and the relationship becomes better. And it is realistically possible for someone who's been married 20, 30, 40, 50 years, if you could measure what goes on in the brain and the heart in terms of like emotion and feeling, for someone who's first falling in love, and oh my word, fireworks are going off, puppy love, you got that warm flush of adrenaline going through the body, and you only see perfection in them. If you could measure that, and then you could also measure what goes on in the brain and heart of someone who has married very well and has spent 2 or 3 generations of time together, and they both are living from a position of love, not fear, and they both constantly every day are living from a position of gratitude for who they are to themselves, who they are to each other, and to life itself. Those people, if you could measure that, you would find out that those ranges of emotional response, psychological response, feeling response would be every bit just as powerful, if not more, than those ones who first fell in love. And a lot of people don't understand that, and because they've never experienced it. And that's why people a lot of times will run from relationship to relationship to relationship, because once you get past that initial adrenaline flow at a surface level, and then it's time to start taking the relationship to the next level, that's where problems can occur. And not the least of which is because neither one was open or honest or transparent with the other person in the first place. And they were trying to outguess each other so they could fit in the mold to qualify for the prize, like I mentioned earlier. And so they're looking for an escape route to go capture that new feeling again when you first fall in love. And they keep chasing that dragon over and over again. But there's no future in that. There's no future in that. And so I'm not meaning to suggest for like this that you go have to look out single-mindedly for the one person you're going to share the rest of your life with, because sometimes the people you come together with are just for short, brief periods of times, and they can be incredibly rewarding experiences on both sides. Even soul agreements being met and exchanged. So what's the moral of the story here? There is no simple answer about trying to live a life and a relationship from a space of love instead of a space of fear, except to learn how to become more aware of what's going on inside of you. And I will tell you that when you're caught up in the fear, Jenna, and you're caught up in a life where you're depressed and you're unhappy, you're not going to be able to register these things. The only way you're going to be able to even begin to see them is to find some way to focus on you and try to work on your life and take your attention off of other people's behaviors and focus on you for the purpose of increasing your self-confidence, your self-esteem, your self-image. If you don't like those expressions, then think of it like this. What is it that you enjoy doing? It brings you satisfaction. It brings you pleasure or enjoyment. What do you like to do for work? And if there's any way that you can do that in a way that directly or indirectly, it can help other people, bingo. That's the thing you're looking for. Do that, because that's automatically going to allow you to start to see some of these behaviors that I was talking about earlier that hide themselves in fear-based perceptions and interpretations. Then you can start to see how you were looking at life or how you were living was not becoming to you or other people. But you can't change those things until you see it. And it's not your responsibility or anybody's responsibility to stay in a toxic relationship or stay in a relationship with anybody where for whatever reason they just have to pledge allegiance every day to their fear. They're not aware of this, of course. And they hug their cactus every day, their negativities. And that's just where they're at right now. And they need to stay there for a while. How long? I don't know. 5 years maybe? I don't know. 10 years? I don't know. Give them the space. Cut them free. Focus on your own life. Nothing says that you can't reconnect with them one day. And sometimes it's that separation. It's that ending of a relationship that is the catalyst that stirs the pot that can bring about real change on both sides. And so I hope this makes sense. I hope that in some way I've addressed your inquiry as you asked about how someone can go about living in love instead of fear and following love instead of fear, and why some people maybe stay stuck in situations because of fear, and then how to overcome being judged by other people when they claim to be your friends but they judge you based on very little info. I hope what I've shared with you has responded on that level. If it hasn't, let me know, and we'll have another one and see if I can do better the next time. But for right now, this is just what came out of me spontaneously, and I want to say thank you one more time, Jenna, because not only are you keeping me busy, your questions are bringing out information that I believe have value in it that other souls can use and benefit from. And it's here on the website for people to have access to, and it's free. Now, my books are not free, but there's tons of information in there. I've spent my whole life, I'm 55 years old as of 2015, and I've been studying this type of stuff since I was 16 years old. And I've devoted my life to the contemplation of the stuff to the point where it's produced like fruit. And those books are that fruit and that whole journey encapsulated in just those 3 books. So where I had to live all these years to figure all this stuff out, you, the reader, have the benefit of just taking the finished work, and it's already there. You don't even have to do the work. It's like you can go to the store and buy a meal that's already prepared from the deli without having to cook it, right? Not the best analogy, but I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. There's a lot of information in my books that can help literally transform someone's life. But those aren't free. But this video and lots of other information here on my website are for free. There's a lot of downloads on here for anybody watching this. Free downloads, samples from my books you can take a look at, and those have invaluable information in them as well. So, in summary, if any of you have any questions of me, please post them here on the website. I've even got my phone number listed at some places. How crazy is that, right? In this day and age, you don't leave your phone number. You nuts? Crazy people might call you. Crazier than me? Yes, crazier than me. But anyway, you've got myself here on the website. You can contact me on the website. You can ask questions. I welcome the connections. I'm looking for some of you. I've been looking for you my whole life. And it's time for us to connect and to develop a relationship of mutual benefit to one another. So please reach out. And with that said, keep up the great work.